Private land use control. As we explored in the previous chapter, government entities maintain significant authority over how property is used through public land use controls, such as zoning, building codes, and police power. However, land use control is not limited to the government. In fact, private parties can and often do impose their own controls on land use to protect property values, maintain neighborhood character, and ensure long-term quality of life within a development. These private controls frequently appear in the form of deed restrictions, covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC&RS, and homeowners association rules. While public regulations set the broader legal framework, private controls often shape the day-to-day appearance and character of a community with rules that are sometimes even more restrictive than governmental zoning. Deed restrictions and CC&RS. A deed restriction is a limitation recorded on a property's title that dictates how that property may be used. Developers commonly impose these restrictions when creating subdivisions or planned communities to maintain consistency and protect property values. For example, a luxury subdivision may require that homes be at least 2,400 square feet, prohibit chain link fences, and limit exterior paint colors to earth tones. These rules help ensure a uniform neighborhood appearance and protect surrounding property values. If a conflict arises between a zoning law and a deed restriction, the more restrictive rule applies. For instance, if zoning allows two-story homes, but CC and RS prohibit any structure over 1 story, the one-story rule prevails. These restrictions are legally enforceable, typically by a homeowners association, HOA, or by neighboring property owners. Enforcement may include fines, forced compliance, or even court injunctions. For example, if a homeowner builds a large shed visible from the street in violation of community rules, the HOA may order removal of the shed and seek legal enforcement if the owner refuses. A quit-claim deed may remove a private deed restriction, but subdivision declarations remain binding until formally amended by the association or court. Examples of common deed restrictions: minimum home size, e.g., no home under 2,000 square feet, setback requirements exceeding city minimums, prohibitions on RVs, boats, or commercial vehicles in driveways, restrictions on exterior colors, roofing materials, or landscaping limitations on short-term rentals, like Airbnb in a community prohibition of home-based businesses visible to the public. These private controls support consistent standards. However, they must comply with federal fair housing laws. For example, a deed cannot legally prevent families with children from living in a subdivision unless the community qualifies as a 55-plus housing development. Likewise, restrictions based on race, religion, national origin, sex, disability, or familial status are illegal under the Fair Housing Act and were declared unenforceable by the Supreme Court in Shelley v. Kramer, 1948. Defeasible fee and restrictive covenants. Some deed restrictions relate to ownership rights rather than community standards. A defeasible fee estate means ownership continues only if conditions in the deed are met. For example, a landowner might donate land to a city for use as a public park. If the city later attempts to build a parking lot or commercial facility on the land, the property would automatically revert to the original owner or heirs under a fee simple determinable estate. By contrast, a fee simple subject to conditions subsequent requires the original owner to take legal action to reclaim title if the condition is violated. While defeasible fees are less common today, restrictive covenants remain widespread in modern real estate. A restrictive covenant operates like a contract running with the land, binding future owners. A homeowner in a planned community might be required to use tile roofs, maintain desert-style landscaping, and keep garbage bins out of sight. If a future owner violates those terms, enforcement continues. Declarations and HOA authority. In planned communities, condominiums, and PUDs, restrictions are typically recorded in a declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions CC and RS. Unlike individual deed restrictions, declarations bind every property owner in the development and cannot be removed by single-party action. Only a properly adopted amendment process can change or remove them. For example, if a community initially prohibits short-term rentals, but residents later want to allow them, the HOA must follow its governing documents and state law to vote and amend the CC&Rs. Injunctions and legal enforcement private controls are enforceable through civil action. If a homeowner paints their house bright purple in a beige-only community, the HOA may file for a court injunction to force compliance. However, if violations are tolerated for an extended time, the association may lose the right to enforce them. This is known as laches, a legal concept preventing enforcement after unreasonable delay. Environmental controls and disclosure responsibilities. Private landowners are also responsible for complying with environmental laws and disclosing known environmental hazards. Federal and state laws govern issues such as asbestos, lead-based paint, mold, radon, carbon monoxide, formaldehyde emissions, and protected wildlife habitats. While public agencies enforce environmental safety, private owners must ensure their properties do not pose health risks and must disclose known issues to buyers. For example, a seller aware of prior mold remediation must disclose it during sale. Similarly, federal law requires disclosure of lead-based paint hazards in homes built before 1978. Environmental compliance protects residents, preserves property value, and limits liability. A homeowner who improperly removes asbestos insulation or conceals radon issues risks lawsuits, financial penalties, and health consequences for occupants. Closing remarks. Private land use controls work hand in hand with public regulations to shape community development and property values. While zoning establishes broad land use categories, deed restrictions and CC&Rs refine what owners can do within those zones. From minimum square footage requirements to paint color approvals and HOA enforcement, these controls ensure uniformity, protect investment value, and enhance neighborhood character. Likewise, environmental regulations remind us that property ownership includes responsibility, not just rights. As a real estate professional, understanding these private and public layers of control empowers you to guide clients, interpret restrictions correctly, and ensure compliance during property transactions. Discussion 1. Why might a luxury subdivision require tile roofs and prohibit chain link fences? Answer. To maintain a consistent aesthetic, preserve property values, and ensure a unified neighborhood appearance. 2. How does enforcement differ between zoning and CC and RS? Answer. Zoning is enforced by government. CC and RS are enforced privately by HOAS or through civil court. 3. If a deed restriction conflicts with zoning, which rule wins? Answer. The more restrictive rule applies, protecting higher standards. 4. Why must sellers disclose mold and radon issues? Answer. To comply with law, protect buyer health, and avoid liability.